EGR valve, exhaust gas recycling, on a pump juice 1.9 diesel Skoda Fabia MK1, late 2001 to 2007. Introduced in the early 70s, the EGR valves were introduced as Euro 1 and mandatory in 2002. This is the pump juice one 2003, which is unlike the SDI ASY engine and 1.4 TDI engine. These often clog up with carbon deposits, causing the engine to idle roughly or stall, reducing performance and fuel economy. You might also hear some knocking noises and the EML light comes on the dashboard, so it's important to clean out the valve and flapper intake regularly. Here's the EGR valve and intake, along with the intake intercooler pipe, which we need to remove. I'll do that first. You want to compress this clip on the valve body, and I find a pair of pipe wrench pliers ideal for this. And from the flexible intercooler pipe by the headlight, detach the vacuum pipe from the two clips and remove from the car. Remove this little piece of soundproofing, and as this is a mechanical EGR, take off the vacuum pipe that attaches at the top of the diaphragm that lifts up the valve, and the flapper valve vacuum pipe just here. There's three 5mm Allen key bolts holding the valve onto the intake manifold, two at the top here. I'll take the top ones off first. The third 5mm manifold bolt is down here at the back, which I found was best to take off last. Then I recommend you take out the bottom ones. These are 6mm Allen key bolts, which attach the small pipe going from the exhaust manifold into the bottom of the EGR valve. As I said, take the two top ones out first. Now the two 6mm bottom ones. These are quite hard to get to, even with a 1/4" wrench, so you might find it easier with just a straightforward Allen key. I managed to loosen mine just enough so I could take them out by my thumb and forefinger. Take out the gasket. And finally the 5mm difficult to get to one at the back. The flexible pipe at the bottom, you have to push that back a bit. It's flexible, so it should just push down, giving just enough room to put your extended wrench onto the head of the bolt. You can see that your wrench goes in between the EGR valve at the bottom and the top of the exhaust branch pipe. Once you've loosened the bolt completely from the intake manifold, then lift the whole unit out together with the bolt, keeping pressure on it with your wrench so you don't lose it, and lift it out. Here's the butterfly flapper valve, which isn't a throttle as such, it's just opens and closes dependent on the amount of air coming in through the intercooler pipe driven by engine speed, which is controlled by the ECU and your foot on the accelerator pedal. In the centre of the body there's a lift pin that's actuated by increased vacuum pressure on a diaphragm that's sat on top of the unit. The pin lifts up with increased engine speed, letting in more exhaust gases into the intake chamber. Here's the bottom inlet for the exhaust gases that attaches to the exhaust branch pipe, and there's an O-ring on the flange that attaches to the intake manifold that, if you don't renew, has the potential to leak. This is a nice pristine cleaned up version. They're not usually like that, especially if you leave them for a few years. What happens is carbon builds up all inside the intake and around the valve and the butterfly flapper, restricting the flow of course, and you end up with the engine struggling. You'll get lumpy, uneven idle and stalling, obviously poor performance and fuel economy, so you really need to clean these out regularly. If you haven't taken yours off for a while, this is probably what it'll look like. This is footage from another car that I looked at. As you can see, there's really thick, heavy deposits of carbon stuck to the sides of the chamber. I found it's best to take off all these thick deposits with a blunted, flat-bladed screwdriver to start with. Then you want to use some EGR cleaner. This one's in a spray can, that's quite useful. Or you could use paraffin or diesel in some sort of bowl and a stiff brush away from the car, as it's quite a messy job. Before wiping it down with some cloths, check that the butterfly flapper valve works correctly. Thoroughly clean the lift pin valve where it goes into the orifice on both sides, and the flapper hinge pivots. You'll also find that the intake manifold gets clogged up as well, but it's best to take that off to be cleaned, as you don't want lumps of carbon falling down behind the valve seats. And it's all nicely cleaned up like this one. You can of course fit a new EGR valve if that's what you prefer, or you can't get yours functioning correctly, but on these models they are quite a simple design, being mechanically controlled. Putting the unit back, fit the difficult to get to 5mm Allen bolt first into the unit, bend down the exhaust branch pipe a little bit. Make sure it's seated squarely and the top bolt holes are aligned. Fit the other two top bolts. And then tighten home all three bolts evenly and secure. Refit the branch pipe with the gasket. Put the bolts in loose to start with. And I found I had to ease up the branch pipe to meet up with the face of the bottom of the EGR valve, so the hole over the threads would be better aligned, enabling the bolt to be inserted easier. And you might have noticed that I'm not wearing gloves. That's because I kept ripping them on the sharp edges because it's such a tight space getting the bolts in. So I temporarily dispense with them doing this. And tighten those home fully. Make sure you remember to put the vacuum pipes back on nice and securely, enabling the flapper valve and the lift pin to work. And a little bit of soundproofing, mine's seen better days. And of course the intercooler pipe. I hope you found this useful, guys, even if it's just to take the bolts out and put them back in again, as that is pretty much the hardest part of doing this. I will cover the intake manifold in another video. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.